3, 2, 1.
Let's go!
Hi, welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Corinne. I was sentenced to 14 months in Brunsfield Women's Maximum Security Prison here in the UK. And today I want to talk about police brutality. So, rewind back to the 90s. So I was 15 years old and there was a domestic situation. I'd gone out and I drank 2 Bacardi Breezers. I was definitely not drunk. I probably was being a pain in the backside. I had friends that were out and we used to go to a youth club. Well, it was like a kids nightclub. It was called Darkness to Light. They knew we were all drinking alcohol in the streets, but they still allowed us into this like kind of like kids nightclub. So basically my friends wanted to stay out a bit later, and I was 15 years old, and I probably should have, just done what my parents said. But being 15, I was being argumentative. It didn't warrant what happened next. Hang on, I've got a second on my face there. So basically, I can't go into too much detail on who it was, but I just want to let everyone know that my mum wasn't involved in this situation. I got into a verbal altercation with a family member, which then turned violent. Keeping in mind I'm 15 years old. I was badly injured in this situation. I had like half golf ball size bruises on my legs, like swollen up. I had chunks of hair missing. I even tried to jump out of my bedroom window, which is on the 2nd floor, to get away from the situation. But I got grabbed by my hair and dragged back down. My hair got stood on and I was being hit. The perpetrator then phoned the police and told them that I was being violent and out of control. 2 male police officers turned up, one of which was quite a large build bloke. Obviously being 15 and never ever being in trouble with the police before, I was terrified. Like, I thought I was going to go to prison. I didn't understand how any of it worked. I was crying, and as I went into my bathroom, which didn't even have a lock on it, to get a tissue, as I've got the tissue, I've turned round and the police officers booted the bathroom door straight into my face, which is like ricocheted off my face. He's grabbed me by the scruff of my neck, of my clothes, and he's dragged me into the front room and he's got me in a rear naked chokehold, and he started to choke me unconscious, and as he was doing it he was mocking me like, "You're not so big and strong now, are you? Look at you now, you're not that big and strong now." And I was like on the verge of passing out. He let go like just before I did pass out. Nobody knew what to do because it was the police, so they thought the police was allowed to do this sort of thing. This is back in the 90s, so they didn't have body cameras, so there was no evidence of what had happened. It was my word against theirs. They ended up then arresting me, even though I was the one that was battered and bruised. When I got to the police station, they were laughing at me, like mocking me, like, oh look who's big and tough now you're crying, like you're in so much trouble. And then they shoved me in a cell for the night with just a mat. They didn't even give me a blanket. I now I would be like kicking off, like I'm older. So I was really scared. Like, I didn't know if I was gonna go to like actual prison. It was just a horrible situation. And so I went to school through the week, and at the weekend I had a weekend job. I worked in a cafe, like collecting dishes and stuff and cups that people had used and bringing them back for the pot washer. And they actually sent me home because I was so battered and bruised and crying and emotional that they actually sent me home that day. This person would also make threats: I'm going to ring your job up, I'm going to get you sacked. But they were a narcissist. I was living with a narcissist. And the problem is, when you're bullied at school and you live with a narcissist, you then have such low self-worth, you end up falling into the hands of other narcissists, which did later on happen in life. After me and my ex-husband separated, he wasn't abusive, but I suffered with severe postnatal depression, and we were young. We were like 20 at the time. And he didn't understand why I wasn't affectionate to him. I didn't want to cuddle him. I didn't want any affection. He didn't understand. I didn't understand what was wrong with me. We even went to the doctor, and the doctor said to him, we think you might have postnatal depression. Anyway, a week after that, my husband decided to leave me. Now, I'm not dissing him. He's a really good dad, and if I ring him and I need help, he helps me out. We get on really well now. We were young at the time. He didn't know what postnatal depression was. I also was undiagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, and the police had already given me PTSD from the way they had treated me. So I had no trust in the police anymore. Later on in life, after I separated from my husband, I was with and I would call him a psychopath. He wasn't diagnosed, but they're normally not, because they won't go and get help, because they don't want to change, they can't change, they don't think there's anything wrong with them. He was a massive narcissist. He was violent. He was mentally abusive. I remember days where he would just knock on the door constantly, trying to see our child, and I didn't know that he'd also hurt my 2.5-year-old, and his speech was delayed, so he couldn't tell me what had happened. What my ex used to do was he would force me to stay awake all night, and if I started to fall asleep, he'd wake me up. Or if I fell asleep, he'd leave, it would be freezing cold, icy outside. He'd leave the patio doors open right near the sofa where I was asleep on purpose. He'd just do really cruel things. He'd attack me in the middle of my sleep. So this one day I passed out downstairs, and he'd gone and attacked one of my children. My son has now 13, and he can still remember that he put a cover over his head, strangled him. There was no marks because of the cover, and he bit all his fingers. I didn't see any marks, and I had no idea at the time of what had happened. Looking back on it now, I should never have put my children near a man like that. But I was very confused. I was undiagnosed with severe mental health problems. I had severe mental health problems. It's just a horrible to think of. I've got to live with the guilt of that as well. And later on, my son ended up, I think my son has ADHD. We're still waiting for a diagnosis because it takes years unless you go private. So I'm probably going to have to save up and go private sometime in the new year. So I ended up calling the police in the end because the harassment was so bad. He would knock on my neighbours' doors. I lived in a big block of flats at the time, and he'd say, oh, can you bring our child to the park so I can play with them? But I know that if they had done that, he would have took our child. I deliberately didn't put his name on the birth certificate because I knew that he'd have rights, and I knew what he was like at this time. In the end, when my child, the one who'd been suffocated, told me what had happened, I managed to flee, move house, and I never ever saw or heard from him again. But he would do things like he'd constantly knock on the door, he'd go into the shop that was right near my house asking for me, asking if they'd seen me, what sort of time I'd come in. He'd harass my neighbours. He would get other women to come and knock on my door or ring my bell and say, oh, he just wants to speak to you, he wants to sort things out. He didn't. He was just trying to worm his way back in to the situation. So I phoned the police because he would spit in my face, he would hit me. He was a cage fighter. He was really strong. He was like in the gym all the time. He's a big bloke, like, and I'm only 5'1". Do you know what I mean? And I'd fight back. Like, I'd give as good as I got. Like, he'd get a whack back. And there was one day that I pulled a samurai sword on him because he attacked me in my sleep, and I just seen it in the corner, and I ripped out the sleeve, and I had it pointed at him, and I said, if you ever touch me again, I will unalive you. And I put the sword back, sort of thing, and I had him thrown up in the toilet. I got all my stuff, I got my kids, I got a taxi, and as we got in the taxi, he's running down the road throwing money at the taxi car, shouting racist things at the taxi driver who'd done nothing wrong. At this point, my kids were in tears, I was in tears. Anyway, so I eventually phoned the police, and I said he'd been spitting in my face and he'd done all these things, and they said, well, you know, it's his word against yours. And I said, yeah, but he's like harassing me. Like, it was like a horror movie. Like, so we had these really big windows that went almost down to the floor, and the curtains were open. And one day I was getting a phone call, and in the end I answered it, and as I've looked up, he's standing there in the rain on the phone looking at me through the window. Like, how creepy is that? I managed to flee. But when I asked for help from the police, they didn't believe me. They stuck their nose up at me, snorted at me. They laughed at me. They went, what do you want us to do, arrest him? Like, they were horrible to me. So I'd had that incident, another incident, and then I had like a nervous breakdown. It wasn't as severe as the one I had in the future. I did self-harm a few times. My children then went to their dad's for the weekend, and I hit the drink bad, and I did end up getting arrested. I went to punch my ex-husband's mother, which I really regret. She didn't deserve it. Her husband got in the way, and he was huge, so it literally just bounced off of him. He dropped the charges and just said like she needs help, which I did need help. I did. I'd been driven mad. Like, I had mental health problems, and then I was being abused on top of it. I've been abused my whole life, and the police never helped me. So that incident where I got arrested, I messaged my ex-husband saying I was gonna end it, and he rang the police because he was frightened for my life. And I got so drunk that I fell asleep face flat on the floor with the knife in my hand, and the door was locked, so they've put the door in, and obviously they've kicked the knife out of my hand, so that's out of the way, the weapon's out of the way by now. And I didn't know, I was disorientated, I was drunk, so I've jumped up and I've just punched one of them in the face, and like literally 6 of them fought with me, and one of the female. Well, I'm sorry, my video cut off, so I've got to get back to where I was. So yeah, the police were really mean to me. So then when I was in my next abusive relationship and I was being abused, I never phoned the police. I would just harm my own self because it was the only relief I could get. Because I was, how can I say this? I wanted to unalive myself so bad, but I didn't, because I didn't want to put the pain on my children and my mum. So I felt like I was suffering and stuck, and I couldn't put myself out of my misery. So the only thing I could do that was less than ending it was to harm myself. So yeah, I would smash my face with vases. I would have to have brain scans because I'd have such bad hematomas. It would go like round here like this. I'd have broken nose. Like I've had like a non-surgical nose job trying to straighten it out. It was really bad. So I never rang the police on my ex. But as soon as my ex got violent with me, because of all the trauma, I would snap and I'd beat him back. Like I'd beat him bad, because by this point I was doing mixed martial arts myself. So like he'd get a good whooping, but he would always run to the police because he was a snitch, right? So he was the abuser, physically, emotionally, mentally. I had nothing left. I was complete. I went from size 14 to size 6 in 6 weeks. I did not eat for over 2 months, and I'm not exaggerating. All I lived off was Coca-Cola. That is it. I could not eat. In the end, the professionals realised that without me saying it, because I wouldn't admit it, they realised I was being abused, and they managed to get me into a rehab. Mainly it was, I had a weed addiction, but it wasn't really the reason they put me in this place. It was to get me away from him, because I was in a trauma bond, and it's a bit like Stockholm syndrome. You're in love with your abuser, you hate them but you love them, so you're stuck, and then they've got you in this cycle. And I'm going to go deep into what narcissism is in another video. But yeah, so further on down the line, when he would get the police called, and they wouldn't believe me, they would believe him, because I'd lashed out at them before. So I would get arrested and I would fight, and it would take about 8 of them to restrain me. And I remember once in the hospital, they got someone and they pinned me down and injected me 3 times. I'm not sure what it was they injected me with, but it took 3 lots of injections just to calm me down. I remember I would cut so bad there would be fat hanging out of my legs, and I would leave it for weeks. I wouldn't go to the hospital. Like, I wasn't doing it for sympathy, I was doing it for relief. It was a temporary relief. And you know what, one night he was really abusing me, and I cut my leg, and it was the middle of the night, freezing cold, and he kicked me out. He put a sanitary pad on it and he sellotaped it, and he said, "No, you get out, I told you can't effing do that in my house." And so I went round to his brother's, and I was crying, and I was in the right state, and I explained everything that was going on. In the end, I've fallen out of love with him. I had no love for him anymore, but he'd taken all my money, and I had nothing. I had no food, I had no heating. Like, he would get me back because I had to rely on him to survive. Like, I had nothing. But I'm also going to put a clip in. I'm going to put a clip in right now of English from Eastbourne police officers beating a handcuffed man, black man. They handcuffed him, and they were beating the guy, police officer. Someone was filming and they didn't know, and they seen this guy punch him in the head. Like, I'll show you that footage. Oh, also another time, I'm in the police van. I've got handcuffed. My knees are tied, my ankles are tied, and they pepper sprayed me. and then put a spit hood on me, and I was just laughing at them because they were all choking. I was like, you lot are a load of pussies, mate. I was like,
you're hiding my hand! You're hiding my hand! You're breaking my hand! Alright, cool. Get my hand! You're hiding my hand! You're hiding my hand!
Pinching me. Stop pinching me.
You punched me as well, yeah?
Yeah,
Stop
pinching me.
sorry, my videos keep cutting out. I was like you're taking, you're doing this to me, and you're the ones that are choking. Like I was goading them at this point because I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care if I was in this world or not. So I had no fear. Nothing bothered me. No pain. I felt no pain, no matter what happened to me. Like that. Oh, that's another thing. They threw me on the floor. Right. I did knock a police officer out. Right. So yeah, they did have to throw me on the floor. I get that. But it was what happened after. They dislocated my kneecap, which is extremely painful. It got pushed back in the struggle. But they wouldn't believe me in the police station. They kept saying, no, it's fine. There's no bruising. So I couldn't put any weight on it. They didn't give me crutches. They didn't give me a brace. They wouldn't take me to the hospital. So I went to prison, and I'm hobbling around with where my knee had been dislocated for 4 months. 4 or 5 months. And then when I was released and I went to the hospital and they x-rayed it, they were like, yeah, you badly dislocated your knee. And I was like, yeah, I knew it. I knew I had done it. But they don't care. They're brutal. And when I was 17 as well, this is another thing. So when I was 17, 2 girls asked for a lighter in town, and I was like, I'm sorry, I haven't got a lighter. So one of them just smacked me in the mouth, and I was like, I ain't having that. Like I've been fighting my whole life because I've had to fight my whole life. I've been living in youth hostels. I've been living with abusers. So I started beating both of them, both the girls. They was getting beat. I was beating them. And the police pull up, and they obviously send me. I get arrested, and then when there's no cameras in the cells and they don't have any body cameras, this is back before they had them, they got me in the cells at 17 years old, men and women, handcuffed me and beat the crap out of me. They beat the crap out of me. So there's police corruption, and there's all these police from the Metropolitan Police coming out now that are going to prison for R-wording women. Yeah? They're disgusting, they're a legalised gang, and they do not help women with domestic violence. I have got 4 friends who are going through domestic abuse, and they are not being helped by the police. People, I've got a friend, I'm not mentioning any names, she was nearly killed by her partner, and he got a 2-year suspended sentence. Suspended. Can you believe it? And he has previous convictions. So I'm getting really worked up. But yeah, that's my story time for today, and I will put that clip in so you can see for yourself how brutal the police can actually be and how they get away with it. They cover for each other. Oh, and that night that I got sprayed in the back of the van, they lost all the footage of the whole evening off all their body cameras got lost. So I didn't get charged for nothing because they knew they committed a crime. But I was too unwell at this point to even make any complaints. But yeah, so that is my stories and my reasons for not trusting the police, for fighting back with the police, because I saw him as a threat. I see a lot of men, any alpha male sort of bloke that thinks he's tough, I see him as a threat. Straight away I will avoid them, or if I'm in a space where I can't get away from them, it gives me panic attacks, and I go into fight or flight mode, and sometimes that ends up being fight mode, and I've been injured. I've had my jaw broke, nose broke, Like, I've been injured in fights, but you know, that's just the way things are, I'm afraid. But yeah, my video cut out again. I'm the True Crime Whisperer, and this is about police corruption. I know it goes on in America as well, but I've been talking about England. So I hope you're ready for the next video. Sorry I've not been uploading much. It's been Christmas, I've got 4 kids, it's been chaos. But I'm back on my game now, so I'll be regularly posting. And I hope you all had a lovely new year, and I'll see you soon.